Okay. Awesome. So
we're recording.
We are now recording. Yeah. So welcome. You look like you've both got nice little spots almost. Well, Deb's got a nice spot in the sunshine and Esther's got the sunshine behind you. So welcome to session 4. And we've had 2 weeks off. So after I've done a little acknowledgement and welcome and light the story candle, I'll go over a little bit over the things that we've covered already. And then we'll dive into playing with our stories today. So we have apologies from Kim, who, as I mentioned before, is driving to Margaret River. I haven't heard from Garnett or Lisa, so perhaps they'll arrive late. If not, they can watch the recording. And if we have a small group, that'll give you a lot of time to work on your stories. So let's now just do our little welcome to country that involves our bodies. So it's like, hello land. I'll touch the land. I'm just walking you through it and then we'll do it. Hello sky, reach for the sky. Hello me, hug self. Hello friends, open wide. Then hands up, hands down. We're on, and you can say the ground that you're on. So we're on
terrible ground.
Thank you, Longland.
Yeah. So let's I'm trying to keep you. Oh, hang on.
Are you on Ballyjalung, Esther? Yeah.
Sorry, I just have a try both things at the same time. Okay, so it's hello land. Hello sky. Hello me. Hello friends. Hands up, hands down. We're on turbo ground, or whatever you are on. Beautiful. I'm going to do a bit of I want to acknowledge the ancestors as well. So I'm just having trouble keeping the two things open. I'll minimize that slightly. Get a handle on this. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I want to acknowledge the ancestors that have looked after country and wherever we are, and have looked after culture, and have looked after stories and songs and dance. And I hope you had a great NAIDOC week. I just got to the end of the celebration here in Brisbane at Musgrave Park, and listened to some music and saw Uncle Alan Parsons, who is pretty amazing, and he was just so pumped and excited. He'd had a great day. So I hope you had a great NAIDOC. So we'll be going over how to rehearse and polish a story, how to develop your voice, and how to develop your generosity and confidence as a teller, and let the story sing you. And with that in mind, I just want to repeat that beautiful quote that I found was shared to me by Laura Sims, by Dina Metzger, which evokes a sense that I love of storytelling, which is the story is not merely a telling. It is not merely a remembering. The story is an action. The story is bringing something forth. The story followed, enacted, and living is a world coming into being. And it evokes that sense that as we are storytellers, we are co-creators of a story, that the audience is creating the story by listening and following you just as much as you are telling the story. And I really love this beautiful image by Marianne Issa. She got it in a meditation. She's an Australian storyteller. I think she's a refugee from somewhere like Ethiopia. And she just got this image of where you are as the storyteller in the middle. You know, you have the story in the middle rather, and the teller is one aspect, the listener is the other aspect, and on the other axis is the ancestors and the descendants. So it's creating a living story, and in fact it's almost more three-dimensional than that. There's just in creating a story and listening and imagining something that you can't see at the moment, it's not in front of you, and imagining it, you're lighting up your imagination in a really powerful way. And for children, if they don't get a chance to imagine something they can't see, there's certain wiring that doesn't form. It's a phenomenally powerful thing to do, and it's a strong muscle that we need to flex. And so conjuring that imagination and imagining certain scenarios that we want to bring into the world is a powerful act of magic, I feel, potentially, and a kindness to each other when it's done with love and commitment. So it reminds me, I haven't got it written down here, but what's that beautiful Leonard Cohen quote about, you know, your offering? Let the crack. I can't hear you, Deb. Deb, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Well, you heard crack anyway. The crack is where the light comes in, shines in. Yeah.
There's something about a bell. If the bell ring, forget your perfect offering. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So that's what we're going to.
What song is it from?
Good question.
Oh well, we'll think about that later.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go round and round the whole circle of two and share how you're going with your story. Just briefly, we're going to go into it more after we do a physical and a vocal warm-up. But just how have you found a story? What was the journey of finding it, and how you're feeling about it? Just to sort of check in. So whoever wants to go first can.
Yep, I'll go because yeah, I'm here. I've done 3 sessions of writing. I wish I'd done more, but you know, life, blah blah. And each time I found it wonderful. I do kind of morning pages. 3 full long pages and pencil. And as I just scribble, it comes. The story comes. After the first go, I thought, ooh, this is good. And then I was trying to think it out. Nothing happened. I had a block. And then I went to Women's Space. They have a writing group there.
I forgot.
And we sat and did 10 minutes scribble, 10 minutes writing, a la Natalie Goldberg and Julia Cameron. Just keep writing, don't judge it, just do it. And my character came back onto the page and had an adventure. And I've been thinking, oh, I must do some more, and this morning I did. And so I've had 3 sessions and it's coming along.
That's okay.
And I didn't realize that I'd woven something in, but I had just towards the end. And so, yes. Ooh, I'm excited to go on.
That's great. That's good. And that's quite an achievement in amongst a busy life, you know, to actually get 3 sessions done. So well done, you. That's great.
Thank
you. Glad you're enjoying the process.
Yeah.
Esther, how are you going with your story?
Well, I can appreciate what Deb was saying about the writing. I just think that in my bookshelf I have The Artist's Way, and you know, it also recommends that morning writing, because I have the themes are coming clearly, like the theme, but the moment I'm trying to grasp, you know, the story or think, you know, trying to use my mind to find the bones, it's just not the way, you know. And so now that I've got my themes, I'm going to practice just writing with no expectation and allow it to come through. Like I have themes of, like last night I listened to a story about, Larissa was telling about this little mouse who has this roar within that only the mouse can hear, and no one else can hear this roar. And so it goes on a quest to find where this roar is coming from, and it has and I sort of like that idea of
Jumping
like
mouse
emerging. I don't know about the mouse. I was trying to figure whether I resonate with that creature. So
is it jumping mouse?
Yeah. Oh, I guess so. She just talked about how it's a common story in lots of cultures. I don't know if she called it.
Ah.
Don't know what she called it.
Oh, okay. I've only heard that story in the context of an American Indian story called Jumping Mouse, about a mouse that hears a roar and goes to investigate it and finds that it's the river roaring and goes on this huge, amazing mythical story.
Yeah, I really like that idea, you know, of igniting the soul, you know, like coming through darkness, like mothering yourself, finding mother in other entities. Like there's a few things that I thought, the idea that every day is a new day and you can find that courage to, be curious and adventurous. I just wanted it as medicine for myself and medicine for my children, like to be able to share a story like that with them.
So great.
That's where it's at.
Okay, great. So it sounds like it'd be good to give you some time to do some writing after we do our warm-up. Yeah? Would you like some more time to write? It sounds like you could both do with a little bit more time to write. And there's a certain energy of writing together, you know, and knowing that there's no distractions. Everyone's watching you online. It can be seen. But I think it's really important to get into our body and to also remember the difference between a written story and a spoken story. So I also write my stories, but then I say them out loud. And then I go from writing to speaking, because there's a certain trajectory you can take when you're writing. You unconsciously start writing it as a written story naturally until you try and speak it. And then you go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe it's not quite a written story. Maybe it's a written story more than a spoken story. So remember the thing that we covered in the earlier weeks about the focus, the features of a told story. Just going through my notes to find it, but it's like a quick beginning, a satisfying conclusion, simple, you know, only a few characters, that sort of thing. So the structures, let me just see, I think it's back on the previous week, just make sure that I've got everything there. Yeah, a quick beginning, straightforward action, a repetitive pattern is optional, but it is good for the early years, a definite climax, and a satisfying conclusion. So that sort of expands on, obviously it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it also needs a quick beginning. So we don't need a long, flowery series of adjectives like we got taught in primary school to set the scene. We want an action sort of. We portray the characters in action. Now, the first time you write it, you might not manage to do show, don't tell. But in subsequent edits, that's what you're aiming for, is show, don't tell. So as I write, so for instance, when I wrote The Silky of Lutra Witter, I found that I was constantly battling with myself. I would work towards show, don't tell, and I would keep writing, and it would keep becoming telling. It would keep becoming explaining the character instead of allowing the character to act in a certain way and have the audience understand who that character was through what they did and what they said, rather than through the narration telling them, you know, she was very frightened. So, so we all feel clear about the difference. I'll just, for the people listening as well to recording, I might just reiterate the difference between show, don't tell. So it's not enormously important in some folk tales. You can sometimes do a bit of telling, obviously it's storytelling, but it still tends to be stronger if you allow the audience to imagine and fill in the gaps themselves. So rather than saying she was a shy girl, you might instead describe the way that she rarely looked up at people. You know, she rarely made eye contact. She remained quiet when other people spoke. Ways of showing what the character is like, or what the setting is like, what the situation is like, how the character is feeling, rather than telling that character was feeling frightened. Instead, you know, the pulse was thumping in their veins, or thumping in their ears, something like that. So that was for me a constant struggle, even though I've been telling stories for 30 years, and I know show, don't tell is a really good thing to do. This sort of desire in me to explain it kept coming up, and I think that's about getting clear about the backstory. So those things come up because you're actually, as you're writing, you're actually deciding what is that character like, what's motivating them, what's the setting like. And so that's what you do in your first drafts. And then later, and this is slightly more advanced, later you come back and you try as hard as you can to pull anything back that is telling and translate it into showing. And so I had this line in the story that I was writing, I had this line underneath, and I would cut out everything that was showing and put it below the line so that it informed my writing. I could remember it, and I could sort of, rather than just deleting it, I felt like it was there somewhere. I wasn't going to use it, but it was there informing. And that's the difference between the back story and the front story. So you will develop this feeling of knowing that character deeply, but you don't want to tell the audience every single detail. You want them to be able to figure it out. Does that feel clear? Yeah. Yeah. And so, so if in the first drafts you do a lot of telling, that's totally fine. That's the baby steps towards crafting the story. So for you, Esther, where you're kind of earlier on in shaping the story, you may naturally find yourself doing a lot of showing, and that is part of the process. That's fine. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. The best thing to do is to bring that editing process on last. And even that may happen, you may just feel to tell the story as it is. And as you're telling it, you may feel, you'll feel those things instinctively, what needs to shift. And that's another way of polishing a story. Yeah, so let's do a little warm up with all those thoughts rattling around inside us. So we'll start with a spinal roll, and then we'll do a bit of vocal warming up. Because even when you're writing, well, maybe we'll do the vocal warm up later. But when you do a bit of writing, it's good to get into your body. So and you'll write differently from the body, allowing yourself to write from the feet up than you will otherwise. So in your own time, I'm going to do 3 spinal rolls or whatever it is that you feel you need to do. If you need to sit quietly, that's what you do. You might want to pummel your shoulders a little bit, just sort of get in your body, because you want to listen to your body and your inner child when you're writing as well, and make sure you're not just writing from your head. So remember, you've got a body. What are story characters with bodies like? You might remember the physical aspects of the characters and the location. So we won't do a long one, but we could just shake out any tension, just like anything that you need to shake out from the couple of weeks before. Shake it out. Get your body moving, get your blood moving. And if that feels enough, I don't know if it does. I think we might just give you some time to write. We might do a bit more warming up later before we tell to each other. So perhaps the first thing you could do is create a synopsis of the story. This is the story of, like if you were to describe it to someone briefly, then just write down these things, and I'll give you about 10 minutes. We'll see if you put your head up and you're looking like you're finished, then we'll stop earlier. But here's a couple of tasks you can do. Create a little synopsis, just a couple of sentences. This is the story of such and such. a list of the key characters, the most important scenes in the story or moments in the story. And if you know, how do you want the audience to feel? What do you, I mean, this can be open, that sometimes a story will have a power beyond what you imagine. But as the storyteller, what is the gift that you want to give through this story? What is that you want to share and have the listener experience? So we'll start there. And so, yeah, I'll give you 10 minutes from now. I'll put some music on. If you don't like it, you can turn it off to make me silent. So just another minute. You guys ready to stop? Or do you want more time? Yep. Okay. So let's just let's share where you're at with them. Just share a bit about what you wrote and how you're going, and get a sense of that together. So if you want to unmute Deborah, you can speak whenever.
Do you want to go first this time, Esther?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yep. So I guess it's a slow process, but I have a sense of the girl. I think it's a girl or an animal. It's something that I'm trying to feel into. You know, the being that it is. It sort of matters, but it's not there yet. But that she has a calling, and I see the setting of a scene is her communing with the moon. You know, and seeking some, sort of soft, intuitive guidance from the moon, and then she'll go on a quest I'm not sure if it'll be a sound that she follows, because I don't really resonate with that, but an inner knowing. And within that, I don't, very beginning stage. Yeah. There is some darkness that she has to traverse, but then it's the sound of what she actually hears or recalled to is the sounds of her ancestors. And so I had initially thought it might be a bird who hears a whistle that the other birds don't hear. It's a different whistle, and it turns out to be her ancestors in the trees, that sort of calling her. But all these bits come, all these ideas, or so it hasn't yet come together. I mean, the key character, I wanted to be the girl, or I wanted the moon to be a character, and even the sound itself to be like a character. And maybe I had sensed like a Medusa type creature that embodies, I guess, I'm sort of intrigued, like the idea of, shame, like the most painful of all emotions, and how to be with that. I thought, I like I'm drawn to Medusa. And so, I wanted it to be a story about sort of intuition and consciousness. And I guess what I was looking to feel, I can't presume what the audience might feel, but something to do with igniting a sense of courage and purpose. But this is very like in the moment, like I could, this could be very different in half an hour, but
It's really beautiful images in there, Esther, like really beautiful mythic images. And I'm wondering, have you ever heard the story of Baba Yaga and Vasilisa?
I'm really fond of her. We actually made her a doll. My daughter, we made it without using. No, I'm very much that doll, but I just get so wary of copying. I'm like, okay, I love that imagery, but what's it mean to me? Like
no, you don't need to. Well, you don't need to worry about copying, but it's I mean, there's no new idea under the sun, really. It's just people reweaving things. Like Shakespeare was a genius, and he never wrote his own plot line. He just borrowed and made them better. And who would ever say that was a bad thing? But if you, it's following your impulse, honoring your impulse. So if you want to write something that makes sense to you, that is coming up from your own inner being, then that's great, as long as you're not feeling like, oh, I don't want to copy, because I'd let that go. But what is beautiful is when you can have those, and I can feel it, those images are informing the story, because we're all drawing on the great unconscious. All the symbols and images are drawing on the same well, but it's going to appear to you and be woven by you in a certain individual way that's unique to you and the people that you're imagining you're telling to. Yeah, beautiful. And also there's those beautiful English stories about the moon stuck in the bog.
Yes, that's so, it's quite a powerful story. It's quite scary and sad, and so I guess I am feeling very cautious around the idea of copying, or stealing story. I have a little,
well,
consciousness.
We got taught that at school as well. Like, cover your work, don't copy from your neighbor. Did you steal this from such and such? All that kind of idea about originality is king. It's just a whole lot of individualistic ponce, I reckon. Like, it comes from an individualistic culture, but actually, things that come from the folk are gems to me, but each time it gets retold in a way, it's being polished. So not to, steer you away from your own original story. That's also really beautiful. I write my own original stories and I get a great deal of kick out of that. But if you do find yourself leaning towards picking out little things from other stories, then that's I think the most important thing is allowing the story to have its own way. with you, rather than you having a head idea about, oh no, that's too much like that story, or that's stealing from that story. You know, just let it.
It's very limiting, and I feel it quite limiting, that story around it. So,
Yeah. So I'm really glad you raised that, because it's a really important story, and a really important issue around telling traditional stories. You know, in the professional realm of telling a traditional story, I shared with you at the very beginning that thing about, you don't want to take somebody else's version and retell it faithfully and then claim it as your own. But you can, you know, I just got an email this morning saying, can I please tell your story, Shelley and Russell, which people around the world have actually, people in America and people in India at least have retold Shelley and Russell. I'm like, yeah, go for it and tell it in your own way. Because I want that story. I wrote it to have an impact, an environmental impact, and the more people tell it, then it's living its purpose, you know. So it's like you create the story and you let it free, and it has its own impetus and its own purpose in its own way. But that's the most important thing, not all these stories about, you know, oh, you don't want to be copying somebody else.
And having that sense when you write that it's not yours either. That's, I guess it's all part of that same.
Yeah, it's like children, you know, that beautiful quote about, you know, your children are not your children, their life's longing for itself, they come through you, not with you, something like that. So stories are a bit like that too. They have their own journey. And I love that. Who is that? The woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote a really great book about creative writing.
Yeah, I have that in the I have it in the bookshelf. Yes.
Yeah, and she talked about that thing of people write a story, like a story wants to be born, and it knocks on the door of various people. And she told that story about how she had the beginnings of this story, and then she had to go and look after her husband, and then her divorce, and she didn't get to write it. And then she met the woman who became her partner, and she'd written a story. It was so incredibly the same. It was unbelievable. But she said the experience was like, okay, the story said, can you write me? And she was too busy. And so it went and found somebody else who was in the position to write that story, you know, and they wrote it in their particular flavor with their particular life experience and their particular skill. But it was sort of, the story had its own juice. I relate to that. You know, they just want to come through.
If I'm really honest, there is a part of me, a young part of me, that wants to be really seen for having created something different, you know, like I just have to acknowledge that that's coming from this maybe from school, that
will be different.
It will be different.
Being self, but without that pressure of being
I mean, look, it could be that there's there's an original story that wants to come through you, in the way that those other stories were original. They were original stories. They weren't folk tales or myths or anything, but they still wanted to come through someone. So as long as you're honoring, you know, what needs to come through you rather than doing it with your head, whatever it is, whether you're drawing on the other older stories or you're writing something completely new, it's just allowing it to have its own way, you know. Yeah, whatever feels good, really. Yeah. Can't go too far wrong if it feels good. Awesome. Deb, did you have any anything you wanted to say to Esther of what you heard, of what you loved, and what
I was drawn in immediately with the young girl traveling and the moon and the inner impulse, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story, Esther.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Me too.
I love what you've done already. I love the idea and the bones, and looking forward to what you have to say.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Deborah. And what how would you describe the story at the moment?
My story. Well, the main characters, Whistlethump, he's an old woodcutter in the forest. Did I explain him before?
Yeah, you did talk about it last time.
Right.
What was the
Yeah.
story to reconnect? It might be the other course that you're doing with me. Maybe you mentioned it.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you know this, Esther, but it's a story I made up for my child when he was young, and he loved Whistlethump, and he kept asking me, and one day I was so tired I just killed him off down a big hole. Anyway, he didn't die down the big hole because this story tells us what happened. And other characters are a bird, a magpie perhaps, bats, unknown beings or creatures in a big underground cavern, and a felt sense of Pan.
Of Pan.
This is the Pan, P-A-N.
Yep.
This is a story of Whistlethump. He's a woodcutter and lives alone in the forest, alone except for the birds, the wombats, the paddymellons, the bats, and of course, the trees. Most important moments. Actually, I'm a bit sort of confused about whether to be in England or in Australia, but I think I have to do it in Aussie, just because I'm more recent. Most important moments. He finds a bird and rescues it. The bird flies away, healed. Whistlethump falls into a deep hole when he's taking the bird back to the forest, finds himself in an underground cavern, has a mystical experience. What do I want the audience to feel? I want them to feel engaged in the forest, the animals, get a sense of the numinous, perhaps a spiritual experience in the cavern. What will I share and have the listener experience? I would share the sense of awe that I've felt in nature, meditating at the mouth of a cave in Tasmania, the wonder and beauty of what's around us, if only we could step out of our daily rounds and experience the ineffable. I want the listener to experience the feelings that Whistlethump is having, to get into that space and feel connected to their own numinous experiences that they've had.
Beautiful. That would be a great gift. That's so beautiful. They're very aligned, aren't they, those two stories?
Yes. Whistle.
We're gonna have a little romance.
That's lovely, the whistle of the ancestors in the trees. That's lovely. I thought of it just because I was thinking about a name for a woodcutter. You know how they chip away and bits fly that go whistling past your ear and thump onto the ground? That's why. Did you get that or not? About Whistlethump?
Oh, right. No, I didn't.
The origin of the name, you didn't actually get it. Maybe I should share that in the story.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So my sense is the way that I planned this was I'm going to shift it slightly, because my sense is both of you would probably appreciate a bit more writing time. So we're going to do story diagrams as a way of that's a possibility too, like story maps. I've got one on my I think I showed it to you previous week, which is where you just draw the story and it gives you a sense of the progression, but that's more for when the story is kind of finished and you're trying to remember it. I've not thought of how to do that as a way to generate the story, but it's possible. So my feeling is to more explore, maybe toy with giving you some provocations. Deb, I feel like you're on your trajectory. You kind of know where you're going, don't you?
Sort of, yeah.
And you may
I don't know, but I've got trust in the guide.
Yeah. And you may too, Esther. But one suggestion I thought to ask you, and this is completely up to whether you think it will work for you and serve your purpose. You may already just be able to write it, but to sort of get to maybe ask the Medusa character what how is she going to challenge the sweet little girl, or the little girl protagonist? Like, what is her curse and what is her blessing? Because presumably it'll be a story of transformation where the Medusa character tries to enchant or avert or capture or damage or frighten or kill the protagonist, and then there'll be some sort of phase. And also you could ask yourself, is there going to be a helper character that assists the girl to figure out?
I was feeling like, well, the girl and Medusa have like a heart connection, because Medusa, my understanding, Medusa, she got in trouble for something that she never did.
Right.
I don't know. My understanding, she was actually raped. And so I thought that in that space they might share this deep pain, and they give it space, and it sort of, something happens and they sort of journey on together. Like, I don't know, I didn't see her as evil, actually, in this
she's not
story.
that
More
kind of. Okay, I might have missed.
No, it's like embodying the part. Oh no, maybe I wasn't clear, because I guess it's down. It's still in my. But I just wanted it to be about like embracing those parts of ourselves that we often shun.
So nevertheless, whether Medusa is an ally or not, she may be initially terrifying to the girl, I presume, because she looks scary, and she has to look beyond how she looks and discover that she's an ally. Like, there's a lot of stories like that. So whatever it is, it feels to me like one of the key things in the plot to figure out is what is going to be the essential challenge that this girl, because there has to be something challenging and scary that she's going to overcome, that gives a little bit of sense of suspense, like, oh shit, is this going to work out okay or not? You don't want it to be too smooth. You've got to kill your darlings in that sense, where they've got to have some skin in the game, So maybe that's a starting point that you could explore. But otherwise, if you feel confident about where you're going with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So would you like another 10 or 15 minutes to write, or will I just wait until you put your head up? Say 10. And if you want more, just say, if you go like that, if that's enough time, and if you want more, just, I want more, whatever. Or more. Great. Awesome. Happy writing.
So what are we writing?
Sorry, I wasn't going to give you so much direction, Deborah, because I thought your story was sort of unfolding. Yes. What word do you feel you are?
Well, I suppose if I go through the other drafts and start piecing it together.
Yeah, so you could, if you wanted to, you could sort of start thinking about the meta picture. So the big story, in that sense of, if you were to draw the story scene by scene, if you can do that yet, you might not be able to yet.
Oh yeah, I can.
That might be a possibility, that you actually do use the story map to, what's the first scene, what's the second scene, what's the climax scene, what's the resolution scene, or what's the, before the resolution, those sort of things. What's the key things that are going to happen, and then the gaps. And you could even draw those pictures and then improvise the words as you look at the pictures and write down what you say. So you could record it on your phone and then write it down. There's all different ways of approaching it in order to stay spoken word instead of written story.
Ah, right. Good. Thank you. Yes, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I just told story, quick beginning, straightforward action, definite climax, satisfactory conclusion.
And limited characters. Yeah.
Limited characters.
Yeah. In terms of limited number of characters. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay, good.
Awesome. Enjoy. Feel free to ask a question if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Stay nearby. Do you like the music?
I couldn't hear it. I occasionally got a or
Oh,
a
I think Zoom shuts
Oh.
it down, so I have to figure out how to do it on the computer. So don't worry about it. I won't play it.
yeah, no.
Okay.
Mm.
So if you'd like to have more time, you're really welcome. And if you need to move or do something else, if you're happy, that's all good.
Okay. Cool.
Hello.
Maybe musing. She may be still in the muse. Oh no, she's up. She's up. Because, you know, I was aware that you might still be in your process, even though you look like you were relaxing. You could actually be dreaming it. I've got an ex who used to work in the public service, and he's a writer, and he'd be looking out the window and people say, "Oh, nothing to do." And he's like, "I'm a writer. I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking very deeply, and I had a good thought until you interrupted me."
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so how did that go? Can we share? You can read from it or just talk about how that was, or both.
That was good process. I've written quick beginning, straightforward action, limited nomenclature, climax, conclusion, wrote down the scenes, and then drew the pictures. There's Whistle Thump in his cabin. Here he is releasing the bird, and he falls down a big hole in the forest.
Yeah.
And then he finds himself in this amazing cavern with the light of a star coming through and a stone circle. And then he gets out and he has to lie down on the grass and falls asleep and forgets all about it, except for the feeling that something special happened. And he's not quite sure what.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, so it's got a sort of a circular story, and he comes back to where he started, but he's been transformed.
Oh, has he? Oh, that's nice. Good idea.
Well, well, something must have happened. Otherwise, it's not a story with it. You know, it has to have some kind of a transformation or some kind of a something
Ah,
has happened
that,
by the end.
that's good. I like that. Yeah. Give it some points.
Yeah, just and a little bit of tension as well. Like that there's something where you're thinking, oh, is that going to work out? Like it doesn't have to be high tension, but there's something happening that has to be resolved. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like down the deep hole.
Yeah, that's
Bit
right.
like Alice, down the deep, finds himself in a passage. He can't go up. He's just can only go forward. It's a bit scary in the dark.
That's right. So he's overcome the fear and realized that he's quite a resilient creature because he can fall down a hole, which seems terrifying, and still get out. And might have met all sorts of creatures along the way, or did. Yeah. Awesome. It reminds me of a story that I learned, a Kamishibai story. I was just thinking that could become a Kamishibai story, Deb.
A committee by?
Kamishibai story. You know, the one with the cards?
No?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll remind me to tell you later before we finish. I'll try not to.
Okay.
I'll put one
Right.
next to, I'll just set it up ready so I don't forget. I thought maybe I talked about it in the recording. That was the free thing. You might have missed that at the start. Maybe
the Japanese thing
Yeah.
that opens up.
Yeah.
Cards. Oh,
That's it.
yeah.
And so can you just tell me the plot line again? So he
Yeah.
looking at the pictures.
Woodcutter's hat. He hears birds and he thinks, oh, that's funny. There's some distress out there. And then he finds a bird in the forest and it's injured. He takes it home and looks after it, and it gets better, and he goes to release it. He tries to take it back to the original place he found it, and he releases it, and then he's watching it go and he falls down the big hole. And yes, and lands unhurt quite magically, and then he finds himself in a passageway and comes out into the cavern. There's glowworms on the ceiling, and he's enchanted, really. And he thinks, am I dreaming? And he bangs his foot on a stone and realizes he's awake, and that he's in a circle of standing stones, and the star is shining through in the middle, and he kind of experiences other presence. It's as if the stones were almost singing, and he decides to try humming, and he hums, and then he starts singing. He sings a great big song that his mum taught him when he was a child, and he always thought it was a bit nonsensical, didn't understand it, but here it sounded right, it fitted with the space he was, and he sang it, and the stones kind of hummed back to him, and he felt elated and excited. My story's getting embellished as I go along.
That's how it happens. Yeah, it's in the telling. Yeah, it's in the telling. Yeah, great.
And then he's aware of the air movement, and he realizes there's another passageway on the other side, and he goes out, and he's in a glade, and he doesn't really recognize this place. He knows that they're eucalyptus trees, but he's not sure where he is. But he suddenly feels really sleepy, and he lies down on the grass and has a nice little sleep. And then when he wakes up, he's forgotten what happened, but he just is left with the feeling of something very special has happened. And about the cavern and everything.
Okay.
But that's for another story when he finds it again.
When he finds it again.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an ongoing story.
Oh yeah.
Great. To George.
Yeah.
Fantastic. How wonderful. You've resurrected this beloved character
Yes. Yes.
that you killed.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't dead actually. We thought he might have been, but he needed to incubate.
Yeah. And be reincarnated in a new form. Is George excited about this?
Oh, he doesn't know yet, but he's down there now, and he's gap filling on the side of the walls. He's going to paint.
What a great son.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
It's so exciting. It's so beautiful. Yeah. And I love it that he it reminds me of I sometimes wove in a reference to a willy wagtail, because in Aboriginal culture willy wagtails they're portrayed differently. Obviously each cultural group, doesn't always have exactly the same reference to everything, but sometimes willy wagtails are seen as gossips. In the story of Condilly, where a man is turned into a willy wagtail for having broken law, the willy wagtail was like an outer, because being transformed into a willy wagtail means you could never sit around a campfire as a human again, and it was a punishment. But the willy wagtail has that really cute gossipy energy, doesn't it? It's like, ooh, let me tell you something. I remember there was one at Brunswick hop around near humans, and it was like it was trying to tell you something. And I wonder if that bird that he's released is actually leading Whistlethump to the hole, because it's something Whistlethump needs. And you could, if you haven't already, maybe you could weave that in, that the bird hopped around in a certain way. Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right.
The bird is a psychopomp. The bird is the thing within that leads you to what you really need to do, even though it might seem like a bad thing at first. Falling down a hole you wouldn't think would be a good thing, but it actually takes him to the deep mysteries.
Ooh. Did you say psycho-prompt?
I think it's called a psychopomp, like psycho pomp, and I think it's I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. And that's that, representing that thing in life, or that inner part of you that takes you down the path that you really need to go. Like, it's the catalyst. Yeah. And also, birds, as you may be familiar, are often seen as messengers from the heavens or from the spirits. Or they're often the intermediaries, and they sing the song that we can't always interpret, but being able to understand the song. Maybe he can understand the song of the bird when he falls down. I don't know. But yeah, it just suggests
when he understands the song of distress from the other birds, and he could hear some call, and he follows that, so he knows something's up.
Yeah, which is a very beautiful portrayal of someone who's tuned into nature. We need more of those stories. Beautiful. And I love the subtlety that he feels the air. He feels the shift in the air. It's not like a big breeze. He just feels, oh, there's something happening. And then that's what helps him out, is being perceptive and present, which I think is a really a wonderful thing, because I was listening to talks by Thich Nhat Hanh, isn't it? Thich Nhat Hanh. And he was talking about, the gift of being present. And, if you're not present, you're too turbulent. You can't perceive what's actually right in front of you. So at some point, the character is able to be calm enough to sense something as subtle as the air, and that leads Whistlethump out and back up to the sunshine. And I think the whole thing of him, I don't know, my impulse when you say he forgets everything, that may be where the story needs to go, and that's probably something that you'll feel whether that's the right way to go when you try it on people and see how they feel about it. That's how stories have always been shaped, is by how the audience responds. Does that sit with most people, like, oh yeah, or is that like, oh really, he forgets? Because maybe he does need to forget, but as you say, he's going to remember again later. So that's a really interesting thing, that It's only a temporary forgetting. And it's a really strong metaphor for how much we forget. So in fact, I'm talking myself into it. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, actually, that little part comes from Piper at the Gates of Dawn in Wind in the Willows. When he goes, little Portly, the otter, gets lost, and Ratty and Mole go off in their boat on a full moon, and there's the wonderful lead up of going along the river, going down a little side alley of the river, whatever that stream, and getting to the island and hearing the pipes and pan, not sure what it is, but following the sound. And they get there, and it's such a magical place with the moonlight and the shining on the leaves and the dance of the leaves, and they don't actually see Pan, but they hear him. Maybe they see him, I don't know, or just the shape of him with little Portly at his feet, and he's playing the pipes, and they're so glad to see little Portly that they rush over, and they forget about Pan, and Pan's disappeared by then, and they take him off and put him in the boat, and they're rowing back and thinking, oh, what just happened? And it was Pan gives them the gift of forgetting. And they both knew something special had happened, but it was forgotten.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. And so
I have to revisit that. I've still got that book, actually, and I love that chapter most of all in that whole book.
Right.
Because it also reminds me of a book about, what's that place in the north of Scotland on a wind-blown west coast, where they grew massive pumpkins. In fact, my computer's on top of the pumpkin on the table right now. And Findhorn.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And someone at Findhorn met Pan and had a similar experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of too much to hold, so you forget it, and it just becomes a subtle numinous experience.
Yeah. Very good, Jenny. You're a nice teacher. I like you. You say all the good things.
Yeah. I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's coming along really beautifully, Deborah. Just needs a bit of water and a little bit of time, and the watering is just at the time, because it's got its own momentum now, hasn't it? Because sometimes stories flow and sometimes they get stuck, and sometimes it's quite a labor. You have to really labor at it, and other times it just kind of whoosh can happen.
It's when you let go and just write.
Yeah.
That's what happened for me anyway. Let go. You're not thinking, just doing.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Deborah.
All right.
Look forward to hearing the next installment of Whistle Thump. And how did you go with looking at the challenges in this story, in your story, for the character?
Me? Me? Yeah. Okay. Oh, Jenny or me?
Esther.
Okay, great. I didn't hear that. So I've got reception is a bit poor.
Okay.
I found that a little bit of challenging just because she's a girl, and I was feeling into telling it to my daughter, and how I like her to feel that there's always that guiding light. There's always this light of safety, that children are always safe, and yet also there's this possibly predatory energy. So I dropped into maybe if it's a woman and that she's trying to keep this flame alive, and that possibly at some point she's tricked into giving away this flame in the promise of safety, security. Had these ideas, and then I could feel myself trying really hard, so I just stopped and just practiced a bit of listening. I just lay there for a bit and Then I had a remembering of a story I think I told initially, which is an actual thing that happened to me as a child, with the darkness down the hallway, down the corridor outside.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was going to weave in. Yeah.
I thought maybe because I had a street light, which was from the bedroom, which was my companion. And so I'm wondering if I can do the show and not tell by actually using something that really happened to me and then sort of embedding the mystical things as an essence, not so much. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
right.
yeah, because I know that's the story with the washing machine, and maybe one night when I went down there to get my clothes, and it was rumbling and it was bubbling, spewing out, and that was the washing machine became the monster, and I had to put my hand in, get the garment that I needed. It swallowed me up, and and I'm thinking maybe something like that, like a bit more quirky, weird, Alice in Wonderland sort of ish.
I think that's great.
I don't know. Fun.
That's really rich,
Yeah.
because and then also you'll have something. I'm also aiming for you to have something to tell next week, so you can have that experience of telling.
Yeah.
And the rest of the story, you might come together in that time, but it's feeling like it's sort of it's in its beginning phases. But this childhood story that's real and true is a really good thing to work on. And you could use the story mapping if you wanted to. You could do do a story diagram, like what is it called when you do you just basically splat all of the ideas about the story.
Mind map.
A mind map. You do a mind map from different ways, and I just think those images are really strong. I remember I used to have a nightmare as a child about my mother coming down the hall, and she was a monster made of soap bubbles, and her head was right at the top up near the ceiling, and she was coming at me going, I'd be going, oh, and running away, and I imagined that it was probably that feeling of how your mother is so, my mother was such a sweetie. She wasn't overbearing, but I mean, she could be strict when she needed to be, but it was probably more that thing that she just filled my life. Like I depended on her utterly because I was so little, and so there's that shadow aspect also of being so dependent on someone and so loving someone, and so they're your whole world. I don't know if it was expressing something like that, but there's all those deep experiences that we all can relate to, and to create suspense, I reckon your daughter would just so love that, because she probably has that now where she's worried about the hands that might grab her feet from under the bed. And that whole idea, it never occurred to me to be frightened of the washing machine because it wasn't in a scary place. But if it was, the thought of, going down in the dark to get your clothes out of the wash and then the monster coming up after you, that's so relatable, so totally relatable. And so to weave that with then a more mythic story is really beautiful. But it feels like it's kind of getting to the nub of what, and maybe it's good to keep following an intuitive way of finding this, the nub of what is the gift of the story that you're working on, what is the darkness or the shadow or the challenge that this character is going to overcome, and just keep visualizing that. I think once you get clear about what is the challenge that the characters are going to overcome, and what is the challenge that Medusa, because it's good that Medusa's an ally, but you need something that the girl is going to have to push past or solve, or be brave, and for your daughter to identify with that protagonist, she's internalizing that solution and that resilience and that resourcefulness as well.
I sort of use my daughter as like, it's my best way into my inner child in a way.
Yeah, it's
a funny way that I have trouble sometimes accessing my inner child, but when I think of my daughter, yeah, it's an instant, like that space, and then I can.
Yeah. And I was also reading a book about money last night, in which she talked about getting your inner child to sit on your lap and asking your inner child what it needs and promising to look after it. And it was from the perspective of money, because sometimes we have irrational things, I certainly do, around money that may stem back from childhood experiences or childhood attitudes and stories about money, and that you're in the grip of this childhood, dysfunctional relationship. But the same could be, true of tapping into inner child to tell a story. is, you know, I get a sense you've probably been in a healthy relationship with your inner child, but if the inner child has been very neglected, it may refuse to speak to you for a while until you kind of work up to it. But you can do, you know, little visualizations where you imagine your inner child sitting on your lap and just say, hey, I'm here, I want to listen to you. Like, what if I'm really interested in telling this story with you, and I wonder what, you know, how do you imagine this story? What are you afraid of? What do you want to overcome? Because you may tap into your own inner child, and you might accidentally also tap into what your daughter will naturally tap into too. So like, do a little visualization and just imagine your inner child, and have a couple of goes if it doesn't come up straight away, but just see if it has a little gem for you. I once polished my last album that I recorded, Stories Reaching for the Moon, by going into a grade 1 class and telling my stories and asking them for feedback. And they gave brilliant feedback. And there was one little girl that just had the best ideas. I was like, thank you. So I acknowledged them on the CD cover, that this class had helped me. Because, yeah. So, and your daughter will have great, you know, I wouldn't be afraid of telling your daughter, and before it's completely finished, she may have some really great ideas. I used to ask my daughter for help, and she often had really great ideas. Yeah. So
yeah, will
create it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
Yeah, it's interesting that that's challenging is the challenge. Like, I wonder if that's reflective of, yeah, in my life. Like, I'm just going to see it as a beautiful mirror, you know, to name the challenge. It's, instead of it being a sense of something challenging, you know, to actually name it. It's just a practice, I think.
Which is a really powerful thing, and that's what stories tell us, is the power of names. Like, you know, the stories of Rumpelstiltskin and all those things, the power of knowing the name of something. Instead of an amorphous fear, I feel frightened now, but why do I feel fear? Okay, let's tune in. Okay, it's just a feeling in my tummy. I've got butterflies. I think I'm afraid of not finding a house, or whatever it is, you know. I think I'm afraid of this. Okay. And then breathing through it and kind of looking at it, shining the light of day on it. Like the story of Baba Yaga and Vasilisa, where they're going through the dark wood and there's all these scary things happening. And then when she comes back, she has the skull on the stick, which represents the light of consciousness and the light of, you know, of seeing things truthfully as they really are, burning away the untrue. So when she comes home, the stepsisters and the stepmother evaporate because they're a shadow aspect. She can now integrate. She doesn't need to have them. Of course, this is an ongoing journey until you're completely spiritually evolved. You still have those voices that go, but you just have to work at a more healthy relationship with them. So yeah, all those beautiful images and metaphors can pour into that, but it's about finding something that is significant enough to feel a relief when it's resolved.
Also, can you remind me what you just identify as I'm creating the story? I just liked your wording around it. Was it not the theme, but what was it, what you're wanting to,
the challenge that you want to overcome, what is the essential fear or challenge that this protagonist or your inner child, you know, needs to feel strong and safe.
Keep returning to that, you know, to keep checking in with that.
Yeah.
As I write.
Yeah. Because there may be, you know, you don't have to go right to the I feel like you are going to, but you don't necessarily with every story have to go right to the gristle of it, you know, but there may be something obfuscating that's sort of missed. You can't see it because there's distress in the way. It's a bit distressing. So and it's also about figuring out what medicine you want. You may not want to tackle the biggest challenge that you had as a child, but you might want to tackle one of them, whatever's calling you at the moment. So just to be aware that mist can be protective, or it can just be confusion, and just getting clearer about breathing through it and letting the fear dissipate to the point of being able to see it clearly and going, oh, that's what I was a bit challenged by, or that's what I'm still challenged by.
Thanks, Jenny.
I should take my own advice actually and write a story about that around finding a house.
What happened with the other one?
It's a long story, but yeah, no,
Oh.
it's a no.
No?
Yeah, no, but it wasn't for me. Yeah, so I found another thing now, but yeah. There'll be one somewhere, sometime. Any other questions or suggestions or comments or feedback for each other or anything like that?
Very juicy.
Very juicy.
Yeah, lots to chew on and get on with, and yeah, inspiring.
Great.
Sorry, Esther, you were speaking.
I just really love that you resurrecting him. I mean, not resurrect. I know that's not what actually happened, but the idea of something from you and your son. I don't know. There's something really special about that to me.
Yeah.
That he lives on.
Yeah. Well, I've got a granddaughter now. My daughter, my son had a daughter, so she's 16 months and she's enjoying books already. Yeah. And he was pleased to hear I was doing a storytelling course, and he said, "Oh, you'll be able to tell stories to Remy." I said, "Yes."
That's so great. He's so lovely. Wow, that's so lovely. So
what's his name? Gaston? The man in America.
Garnett.
Garnett said, because I told him of all, you know, how I've uprooted across the world. He said, "Well, you are the roots now." For your grandchildren. Yeah.
That's nice. And that is a really nice thing that you've got a reference to standing stones in that sense, that connects you to your country of origin. And that there are standing stones. I went to what's it? Armadale? No, not Armadale. Glen Innes, where the standing stones are. Yeah. I'm not sure what I couldn't sense the energy or whether there really was a strong energy there or not, but it's interesting that they're there.
There were some standing stones in Mullumbimby. As you go towards Brunswick Head, somewhere in back there. Yeah. And the farmer ploughed them up. Well, yeah, that's a long story. I've heard all sorts of different of that story. That it was Kurt Vonnegut, who was a bit of an oddball, who put that story around, and whether it was true, there's sort of a lot of debate. But I'm not quite. Vonnegut. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut came over there, and anyway. Oh, really? Oh,
we'll have that discussion another time. But yeah.
Okay.
But you know, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Right.
So so next week, the focus will be on retelling your stories and giving constructive feedback. And I will also give some teaching, some more teaching. But what I would suggest you could think about doing is looking at the story parachute. So if you're up to, I'm hoping that you can tell the story. So a great way to do that is to draw your story map, so that you don't have to read it word for word. If you really, really want to read it word for word, you could maybe have a go at doing both, like doing a version from the story map and just improvising the words, and then reading it as you want to actually say it. But another way of doing it is using the story parachute, whether you're just memorizing, if you've got time, the first sentence, the last sentence, and one in the middle. And you're really welcome to use, you know, palm cards with dot points. Where have I put my, I had one to show you. I think I might have gone and tidied it up, but I did one for the Selkie of Lucha Witter. I think I'll just spend another minute looking, and then I'll show you the Kamishi by small one. No, I put it away. Anyway, it's basically I just did a story arc with the key scenes that I wanted to remember. so that while I was telling it, I had it up where I could look without reading it. I could just think, oh, yeah, that's right. And I just did a stick figures to represent the key things I didn't want to forget. That's the key sort of moments, because it was quite a complex plot, that one. And yeah, so if you wanted to use palm cards, the secret of palm cards is have the letters big enough that you can read them without reading them. You can just glance at them and they're just dot points. But a story map can be less tempting to read and more visual. So, and next week we'll do a little visualization as well. Are there any other questions? We've already had questions, haven't we?
A visualization of what?
Oh, we'll do a visualization that I do to give you, to kind of bequeath upon you the feeling that you can tell stories. We'll have
right.
the story elder kind of release her energy onto you before we start. We'll do some warming up. We'll do more physical and vocal warm up so that you can feel in your body to tell your story. And you could think about setting up your, if it's possible for you to set up your camera so that you can stand while you're telling, but it's not essential. I've just come to prefer it, but it took me a long time to figure out a system to do that. And I basically bought a riser, so that's not easy for everyone. If it's easy and you want to tell standing up, but otherwise don't worry too much. Well, that's everything for this week. I think, I know, I just wanted to briefly show you this kind of Kamishibai. Did you see that kind?
Oh yeah.
If you do a fancy one, you can do, if you're into drawings or you know anyone who is into drawings, you know, you can do the fancy one with a frame, or you can just hold cards and move them. But this kind is for a small Kamishibai. I did this one about the story of Froko the frog because I can't draw very well, and I watched a YouTube on how to draw frogs in order to make something that looks froggish. And so I realized that when I made this little cardboard thing very easily, the easiest way of moving the cards was to put little handles on it. There's lots of how to do it on YouTube, but it's fairly self-evident. So that you can, if you want to use pictures for a story, it's kind of intimate. You know, this kind of small one is obviously for just a couple of people at a time. And so then it's just to get a, if that helps, that's another option. But keep it simple. Stupid is often the best option when you're starting. So yeah, that's everything. Yeah. So have a beautiful week, and I really look forward to hearing your stories next week. Kim will join us again next week. Mo sends her apologies and can't make it. And Lisa also said, oh my God, I forgot. I can't remember. I don't think she said whether she's coming next week or not, but hopefully we'll have Kim, not Mose, and maybe Lisa. Haven't heard from Garnett. So yeah, have a beautiful week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Oh,
thank you.
I never lit the story candle, but anyway, I'll blow it out.
Right.
I'm sure it was etherically awake.
Yeah. Is that magnolia you've got there, Esther?
Yeah, I want to try and propagate some. I picked some. They're so beautiful. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's stunning. I want to try and strike some for my garden.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a tree in Mullumbimby, like this forest of magnolias that we drove past, and wow.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the name for your little girl. The name for your character. As a name for your character, Magnolia.
Actually, very lovely.
All right. Have a great week, guys. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.